And it's a little bit of both sides, if you will, the head and the heart sort of come into play. So functional and emotional benefits, getting that right is so important. And making sure that those are connected. The strongest brands connect their emotional and their functional. They don't just add emotional on top of their functional. They figure out how the two link up. And that's really critical. So Apple is an obvious example, so I'm not going to go through it a lot because I think we've heard a lot, you know a lot about it. iPad, I guess the new iPad's being sold today. I guess the new version is being launched Friday morning in North America. So again, strong brand performance, promise intrinsically, the performance design, but obviously extrinsically, the personality, the character, the whole think different, which was once an ad campaign, which they've done such a great job with. And the other thing I'll say, they are a great example. This is, I have this in the book, I love this. When you talk about extending a brand, the best case scenario is when you achieve three things, which Apple did. And they did that when they launched, this is going back now a while, but when they launched the iPod and the iTunes. Three things happen. Three things can happen. One is you actually create a new category for your brand, which they did. I mean, huge category. One. Two, in the process, you strengthen your parent brand, because now people think of you differently, which they did. So they started selling a lot more Macs and other sort of the computers than they ever did before. And then three, you give yourself permission to go even farther out, which was iPhone. So that's the beauty of a good extension. The right category extension extends you to another category, gives you those three benefits, and that's powerful because it does so much for you if you come up with the right category extension, which they did. The other thing, and I don't think I have a slide on this, so I'll mention it now, but one thing people don't realize about the success of the iPod was how important channels were for that. People often forget about channels. They don't think about it as much. They really expanded their channels with iPod. Way beyond Apple stores, way beyond, a lot more places than they ever sold before. My other example is Pampers, which I know is sold here as well as all over the world. Very successful brand. It's Procter & Gamble's biggest brand, $6 billion brand, I think. It's a huge brand for them. For a long time, Pampers was sold as Procter & Gamble sold all their products in a very functional way. It was all about absorbency. So how much could the diaper absorb? So they'd have these product demonstration ads where they would have two diapers and they'd pour colored liquid into the two diapers, Pampers and the competitor, and you'd see Pampers would hold more of the colored liquid, which meant the baby stayed drier. End of story, buy Pampers. You want a dry baby, buy Pampers. Okay, no other diaper does as well. And that's a great story, but you can go a little farther than that because it's like, well, okay, that's great, but what's the payoff to the parent and to the baby for the dryness? I mean, what's the emotional payoff? And this is where they were really smart. So what they did was say, okay, think about it. Babies, stays drier because of the diaper. What are the benefits? Well, the baby sleeps better at night. Is more active during the day. The baby basically can develop more, do more things. They're not as upset as much. They're able to enjoy things more. They're learning more. So in some ways, even though we're about a dry diaper, ultimately we're really trying to make the baby and help the baby to develop. So we're caring for babies' development. And that was their slogan, and that was their mantra, internally and externally. And that was huge, because that just changed their marketing all around. Very successful, and allowed them then to create that emotional payoff that was linked to the functional. So they worked together in a very, very synergistic way. All right, so the next one, this is the longest imperative. I warn you now, all right? So I warn you now, it's long, it's like a lot of slides, so hang in there on this one. It's the most complicated one. So I'm only going to touch on it some. We could spend, a lot of time on this one. So this imperative is to make the whole of the branding program greater than the sum of the parts. It's about integrating. It's about making sure that 1 + 1 equals more than 2. So it's all about making sure your channels and your communications are mixed and matched in the right way so that you balance their strengths and weaknesses. Because the one thing that's true for any channel, whether it's selling through a store, selling direct, selling online, any communication, traditional, non-traditional, online, offline, they all have strengths and weaknesses. There's not a magic approach. And so the key is to balance those and integrate them in the right way. And that's the theme of this imperative. My example is Red Bull. So I'll talk about them briefly, and then I'm going to talk more about some concepts. I'll go a little deep on this one, like I said. I was actually lucky. Red Bull is a brand I got involved with for a long time. Never worked with them in a formal way, but I knew their head of marketing from almost the start, once they left Austria, which was back in the mid-90s. A guy named Norbert Kreiheimer. I got to know him before he went to Red Bull. And so Red Bull I've always been fascinated by. I've never seen a brand so successful for the longest time. They had basically one SKU. So one package size, one product, and that was it. And they created a new category, the functional energy drink category. It didn't exist. They are a fascinating case study. And they have done some great marketing. So basically, again, they great example of taking advantage of all the brand elements, name, logo, slogan, Red Bull gives you wings, right? And they do some really, really good marketing. They do on-premise and in-store marketing. That's the push side of marketing. So making sure the product's available in the right places in the right ways. At the same time, they do a lot of what we call pull, by communicating directly with consumers. And they do that through traditional and non-traditional advertising and other forms of communication, digital marketing and events. And this is what I think is really cool. So this is just one slide. It's got some of the stuff they do. And some of it's very traditional. So back to before we get into events, I mean, the traditional media, the ads they've run for years are those cartoon ads. You've seen those, right? You've seen those cartoon ads. I mean, they're all over the world. They're the cheapest ads in the world. Somebody, brilliant idea. You can use any voiceover you want. You want the language, we can do it, right? Very simple cartoons, but they all make the point. Red Bull gives you wings, right? It vitalizes mind, body, and spirit. So that's important. So their traditional advertising is, in a very clever, direct way, reinforcing a basic brand promise, which allows them then to do a lot of other things, digitally and as well as offline. So this is a little bit of their offline activities, events, and experiences. They do some really neat things. This, a couple things you may not know about. This is something called crashed ice. They do this in parts of Europe, North America, colder climates in winter. And what they do is they create these huge tracts of ice in major cities like Quebec, okay, parts of Germany, Norway, etc., in winter. And they race down. They basically get 3 or 4 competitors. They have a total in any one race, maybe 30, 40 competitors all together, and they race to the bottom of the hill. It's a little bit, roller derby. It's a little bit of sort of roller derby with skates, and it's exciting and it's interesting. And they light up the track at night. 100,000 people will come to this thing. It's televised. They have Red Bull all over the place. It just takes over a city for a night. Huge PR, and Red Bull gives you wings. It's very, very clever. The bottom one here is something called Flugtag. Has anyone ever heard of Flugtag before for Red Bull? Anyone? Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Anybody? It's not necessarily done here yet. It probably will be. It seems like an obvious place. Red Bull has it's basically flying day in Germany. So they go to different parts of the world where they're selling Red Bull. And what they'll do is they'll create this event. They'll put a big tower up. And the idea of the contest is how far you can go with a man-made flying machine. So no power or anything else. Because remember, Red Bull gives you wings, right? So if you drink a Red Bull, you should be able to fly up that tower. And some people take it really seriously. Like this guy right here has got his whole glider and everything. I mean, he's going to go for it, right? He's going to try to win. Other people, they'll be like in bathtubs, okay? That's not going to work, all right? So it's fun, it's a party, 100,000 people, it's a summer activity, it's televised. I mean, it's just so cool. So anyway, so Red Bull does a really neat job. Check them out. But there's, the themes. Here's the big themes here. The thing that I would say that why I chose Red Bull is because you can go online, check all the videos are there. They have lots of stuff online. They have the real-world events, and they have traditional advertising. And those are the 3 pieces that I think, going forward, all brands need to have in some way, shape, or form. A lot of different ways you can do it, but I think you need all 3. And so, I think the key, marketing's there's no question marketing's going to be more digital, more interactive, and more social. So the fact is, this bubble right here is going to get bigger. I mean, we know that. That doesn't mean the other two bubbles aren't also going to be important or maybe equally big or bigger in certain cases. So, we know all this is going to happen because of the fact more people are online. You can reinforce your traditional or existing communications. You can do so many things with this, the participation, and it really is an asset you can build as you get a database together, as you build a community. I mean, there's so many neat things you can do. And I really do think it's not just about social media. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, the three big ones in North America, in addition to all the communities and bloggers and everything else. You've got over here, what I call more traditional online interactive that are hugely important in terms of your websites, your microsites, all the things you do there, and the information that you provide, and the other things that go on in addition to emails and text messages you send out, and banner ads, and obviously search advertising, which has become hugely important. But here's to me, the key in thinking about interactive, for me, is that, look, the thing I like about it is it gives you a chance to establish a public voice and presence on the internet, which is really important. You can have a dialogue. You can monitor what people are saying. There are lots of ways to do that now. Is it good? Is it bad? Are there problems that are coming up? Reinforces what else you do. And most importantly, it ensures that you stay innovative and you stay relevant. Because the question is, what do you have to say in your social media? What do you have to say on your website? At the end of the day, end of the week, end of the month, end of the year, the question all brands should be asking is, what have I done to stay innovative and move my brand forward? And what have I done to stay relevant and stay close to my customer? And if I can't answer that in a positive way, I'm in trouble. I talked about Levi Strauss. Levi Strauss has lost half their market share over the last 10 years, which is shocking for a brand that was as strong and as powerful as Levi Strauss. Why? They didn't innovate, they didn't stay relevant. What does social media and online do? It forces you to innovate and stay relevant. So that's the positive. There are lots of positives. But here's the caveat. When it comes to social media, not everyone gets involved. So it's only some of the consumers want to get involved with some of the brands some of the time. They have other things to do. So I get upset when I hear people say, the consumer's in charge now of marketing. They're the ones calling the shots in marketing. They're the brand managers now. And I'm thinking, no, they're not. They don't want to be. They have jobs. They don't want your job. Okay? Do they want to have a voice? Maybe. Okay, maybe. But they don't necessarily want to run your brand. So I think that's taking it too far. I think the fact is consumers sometimes want to play a role, sometimes want to have a say, sometimes don't. Okay? So, to me, it's like, for those people who do want to get involved, I want to do everything I can to make that the most productive relationship I can make in all the ways that I can. Encourage them and reap all those benefits. But you know what? I better realize that some of those are not going to do that. And I better make sure in my marketing program it works for people who are not necessarily involved in social media. So, and the other thing is, it's not just about interactive. It's not just about digital or social, because I think just as important are traditional mass media communications. I'm still a big believer in print, so I'm glad Times of India is here. I still believe in that. Magazines, newspapers, broadcast, TV, radio, because they give you coverage and they give you control. I can reach more people, and I can craft my message and fine-tune and specify things in ways I can't do otherwise. And the other thing is, here's my other prediction, that what you're going to find is everyone's going to go online. And at some point, people are going to realize, you know what, it was kind of nice when people actually talked to other people, like in person, when you actually did things physically, when you weren't in front of a screen. And I predict that there's going to be a movement towards more events and experiences, because people are going to need that. They're going to get tired of the digital world at times. They're going to love brands who come up with ways to engage their senses through events and promotions and contests that they just get involved in a physical way with. And the beauty of this is that it really allows you to educate and entertain your customers. And you do it, and you make a splash. You find a way to break through. You find either there's news about your brand that you can take advantage of, or in some cases you'll create the news because you'll find a way to create an event or something else. So I think this is really important. So these three are the ones I focus on. The one I haven't talked much about is the one I think is going to be interesting over the short run, which is mobile. I think with the smartphone penetration in a country like India, it's just huge. I just think it's going to be really interesting to see how that unfolds. But basically what that does for you is I can now send, location-based messages. Certain places, certain times, I can reach out to you and tell you certain things or give you certain offers. And figuring that out and getting that database together is going to be really, really an advantage for the right marketers. So I see a lot of opportunities here for sure in mobile. All right, so we're back to our imperatives. So that one, so we started off talking about the customer. We talked about the importance of getting close to the customer. We talked about the importance of creating more emotional, bringing design, the intangibles, if you will. We talked about integrating marketing. Now I want to talk about understanding where you can take a brand and how you can do that, really understanding the potential of your brands. Because the one thing that's true, here's the thing I find interesting. We talk about Nike. 25 years ago, Nike was selling mostly tennis, basketball, running shoes. Mostly North America. They weren't international at all to speak of. Mostly to males, probably 12 to 24, 29. That was their sweet spot. That's most of what they sold. That's 25 years ago. You know what they're selling now? They're selling all kinds of shoes, clothing, and equipment in all kinds of sports, to all kinds of people, in all kinds of countries. In 25 years. I mean, that's phenomenal. Phenomenal. So the beauty of that is they've kind of understood that the potential of that brand, the power of that brand, and how they could go into so many categories. So that's key. It's really figuring out your product development, your brand architecture strategy, understanding your potential, where can you extend and how you do it right, and then maximizing that growth across segments, across geographies, across categories. Nike being an example of that. Another example is Crayola, and I'm trying to remember, is Crayola sold in India? It's not sold here, is it? Do you know about Crayola? Crayola is a crayon. You know about crayons, right? So Crayola crayons. So when I was growing up, the Crayola crayons, they were the crayon. Everyone had like Crayola crayons. And the only question were how many crayons were in the box that you were kind of coloring with as a little kid. And was it 8 crayons or was it? Actually, I think I have it. 8 crayons or 24 crayons, or the big 64 box. This big box here, it actually had a sharpener built into the box. So as a kid, that was like so cool. Because your sharpener, you didn't have to have the little sharpener. You actually had the box, had it right there. Very, very cool. So here's Crayola, and they're very successful. Market leader.